Okay, as I mentioned, a short-term debt ceiling deal was reached earlier today with just 11 days left before the government was expected to default. But according to the latest reports, GOP leaders are struggling to convince 10 Republicans to vote to advance the short-term increase of the debt ceiling. With me now to talk about how the day has been unfolding and where things stand is Senator Roy Blunt of Missouri. He is the chairman of the Senate Republican Policy Committee, ranking member of the Senate Rules Committee, and a member of the Appropriations Committee. Senator, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Tony, great to be with you.
Senator, give us an update on where...
going on. Sounds like you've got a lot going on out there and a great program today and tonight. And I was interested, got the Justice Department suing states over election laws and deciding that parents showing up at school board meetings might be domestic terrorists. And surely it gives us all a lot to talk about in addition to this incredible amount of spending that Democrats want to do in the next bill that they can finally agree on.
Yeah, so much happening so quickly. It's hard to keep focus on all the attacks on our freedom, whether it be the overspending, these massive programs by the Democrats that they're pushing through. But let's talk about the debt ceiling. That's front and center right now. Is there a deal going to be agreed upon tonight?
You know, I think we still are waiting to see if that's going to happen. If there is a deal agreed on, the two things that Republicans have been saying we wanted to see happen that will happen is Democrats will vote for a specific amount of increasing the debt rather than just suspending the debt ceiling like the government has been doing for 10 years now, suspending the debt ceiling. And when you come to the end of that suspension, the new debt ceiling became whatever you could spend between now and then. So having them admit to and agree to an amount that you have to increase the debt ceiling, and when that amount, you get to the end of that amount, that's when you have to do this again. And the other thing is that the actual debt ceiling vote itself would be all the Democrats versus all the Republicans. The question is it to get Republicans to allow that vote to occur? And frankly, that's in the backdrop of a lot of concern that this could be the moment when Democrats use the debt ceiling and the full faith and credit of the government as the reason to change the Senate rules. And if that happens, all kinds of bad things will happen in a very short time, from admitting D.C. and maybe Puerto Rico as states to changing election laws to packing the Supreme Court. And so there's a lot at stake, and sometimes in this job you wind up casting a vote that's not the perfect vote to try to prevent a worse thing from happening. And if the leader's right, and if this is the moment when the filibuster rule is at risk, there's a lot to lose if we lose the nature of the Senate and lose the ability to stop those things from happening that so far we've been able to stop this year.
Yeah, a lot of people compare this. It's not checkers, it's chess. You have to think down the road what other actions might be taken. But I want to go back to your point about the Democrats having to set a specific number to the debt ceiling raise. And the reason they don't want to do that is they don't want to own that dollar amount because they know politically that's toxic to go back and say, well, we raised the debt ceiling to, I don't know what, $30 trillion, $35 trillion. They don't want to own that when they go back to the American people.
Well, I think that's right. And once you admit to an amount, if we think it will last 1 month or 2 months, everybody can multiply, and suddenly you've got them on record saying, if we don't do even anything new, we're going to have this kind of debt increase over the next 2 years, 5 years, or 6 months. But if we then do this new package of all kinds of entitlements, as well as government deciding that anybody can go to community college for free. I had a university president in my office today. I said, if you really want to make higher education expensive, make it free.
Right, exactly.
Once you tell people on campuses and off campuses that the government's going to pay the bill, I guarantee you that bill is going to go up faster than it would have gone up otherwise.
Let me ask you, maybe you can't say this, but being in the leadership meetings, I've watched this unfold and I see what the Republican leader is doing, as you talked about. There's several factors to look at. But in many ways, he pulled the Democrats fat out of the fire on this, because they were the ones that could have done this 2 months ago and they didn't do it. And as soon as he issued a offer to them to allow this temporary debt ceiling raise to go through with a dollar amount, they're now saying, well, he caved, he blinked, he gave in, we won.
Well, we'll see. I was comfortable with where we were before, but the leader had conversations with Senator Sinema and Senator Manchin and others that led him to believe that this was a moment of real jeopardy. And the big thing that Democrats are hopefully setting the new standard on is having to admit to a number. And again, in every debt ceiling increase until President Obama was president, until 2011, it was always you increase the debt ceiling to a number, and when you got to that number, then you had to do it again. But after 2011, you suspended the debt ceiling to a date, and when you got to that date, however much debt you'd been able to pile up was the debt ceiling at that moment. And we need to break that pattern if we can. And if this starts breaking that pattern, it's a good thing. But certainly, I don't want to be part of raising the debt ceiling. I particularly don't want to be part of adding new programs that will add to the debt beyond whatever decisions were made last year in COVID with President Trump, or other decisions that clearly added to debt. But the debt ceiling should be about the future. President Biden said the other day the debt ceiling is about the past, it's not about the future. I've been here a while, and every time we've had a debt ceiling debate, it's always been about the future. And the Democrats always, in return for their support of raising the debt ceiling, wanted to spend more money. And Republicans always wanted to put some kind of restraint on the system that wasn't currently there. Remember the caps deal a decade ago? For a decade, we had to deal with the fact that in law there was a ceiling on spending. And while we occasionally had to suspend that, like we did in 2019 when Speaker Pelosi said, I'm not going to do anything to raise the debt ceiling unless the Trump White House agrees to spend more money. And eventually the Trump White House and Secretary Mnuchin agreed to spend more money. And it's always about the future, no matter what President Biden says about what this debt ceiling debate is about.
Senator Roy Blunt, one final question for you. What has led to this debt ceiling raise is spending. And of course, that's the next issue with the reconciliation, $3.5 trillion to $4.2, depending on who does the math. Senator Manchin saying he's not going to support anything above $1.5 trillion. What's going to happen?
Well, I hope we don't do more than $1.5 trillion. And I'm not for doing any of it. I think all of it is an addition that we don't need. There are solutions in search of a problem. Anybody that wants to go to college now, to community college for free, if you're at the income level that we have set for Pell Grant recipients, anybody who gets the full Pell Grant in virtually any state gets their tuition, their books, and their fees paid, and usually has a little money left over for transportation. If 3- and 4-year-old kindergarten is a good idea, the states have funded kindergarten up till now. It should be a good idea that state governments and local taxpayers embrace. I don't think these are areas where the federal government needs to come in, because every time the federal government gets there, it gets there with new rules and regulations and new guidelines.
Absolutely. Senator Roy Blunt, always great to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining us today.